The twins let go of his hands the moment they saw her, and Nathan Kimball, who had not lost hold of those two small hands in the 8 months since their mother died, felt them slip through his fingers and go running across the church social lawn at Willow Grove toward a woman he had never met. He opened his mouth to call them back. No sound came. He watched, helpless, as his son and daughter, 5 years old, wild-haired, and famously wary of every soul in the county, arrived at the schoolteacher's skirts and stopped, and looked up at her, and did not run away. The woman knelt down in the grass to meet them at their own height. That was the first thing Nathan noticed, and it went into him like a splinter, because his Sarah used to do that. Get down low so the children never had to crane up. The teacher said something he couldn't hear. His daughter, Cora, who had not spoken above a whisper to a stranger since the funeral, said something back. And his son, Toby, who flinched from every hand that reached for him, reached up on his own and touched a wooden button on the woman's sleeve, and the woman let him and smiled, and Nathan Kimball stood frozen at the edge of the lawn, with a plate of somebody's fried chicken going cold in his hand, and did not know what he was feeling, because he had made a project, these 8 months, of feeling nothing at all. Amelia Hadley had not come to the social to acquire anyone. She had come because a new schoolteacher was expected to, and because Mrs. Pruitt, who ran the boarding house, had baked 2 pies in her honor and would have been wounded by her absence. She had noticed the 2 children earlier. How could a person not? They were the only children on the lawn not shrieking and chasing, but standing gravely to either side of a tall, unsmiling man in a good dark coat, holding his hands like 2 small anchors keeping a ship from drifting out to sea. Motherless, she'd thought, with the quick certainty of a woman who had taught the motherless before. And their father was drowning. That was plain too, in the stiff set of his shoulders and the way his eyes went nowhere. Then the 2 of them had broken from him and crossed the whole lawn and planted themselves in front of her, and the little girl had whispered, "You've got a kind face," and the little boy had touched her button, and Amelia's heart, which was a sensible and well-defended organ, had turned over once, quietly, and been lost. "Well," she said to them, "I've got a kind face and a bag of lemon drops in my reticule, and I don't rightly know what to do with either one all by myself. Would you help me?" That was how Nathan Kimball came across the lawn at last, and found the new schoolteacher sitting in the grass with his children on either side of her, all 3 of them working lemon drops around in their cheeks, and he stood over them with his cold plate of chicken, and could not think of one word to say. "Pa," said Cora, around her candy, "this is Miss Hadley. She's ours." "She teaches the school," Toby corrected, with the terrible precision of a twin. "But also, she's ours." "Children," Nathan managed, and his voice came out rusty. "You can't just, she isn't." He stopped. Amelia Hadley was looking up at him from the grass with an expression of such frank, unhurried kindness that the rest of the sentence deserted him entirely. "They're only being friendly, Mr. Kimball," she said, rising and brushing off her skirt. "I'm Amelia Hadley. I've the school this term. You've a fine pair of children. The girl reads faces like a Pinkerton, and the boy's got an engineer's fingers. He's already taken apart the clasp on my bag twice and put it back better than it was." She said it lightly, but she watched his face while she said it, and she saw the thing she'd suspected, that no one had praised his children to him in a long while, that folks had gone quiet and pitying around this family, and that the man was starved half to death for someone to speak of his son and daughter as though they had a future and not just a wound. Nathan Kimball's jaw worked. "They don't take to people," he said. It came out almost like an accusation or a plea. "Not since. They don't take to anybody. Cora won't hardly speak. Toby won't be touched." "I know," Amelia said gently. "I saw. That's why I thought I'd better sit very still and let them do the choosing." She looked down at the twins, and then back up at their father, and her voice stayed soft. "Children who've lost their mother are careful, Mr. Kimball. They spend all they've got being careful. When they spend it on someone, it means something. I'd not take it lightly. I don't intend to." He did not know what to do with that, so he did what grief-stiff men do, which was to gather up his children and make his excuses and go home. But Cora looked back over her father's shoulder the whole length of the lawn, and waved, and Amelia waved back until the wagon was gone. She would have left it there. She was a sensible woman, and the last thing a new teacher needed was to be talked about in connection with a widowed rancher inside her first month. But the twins had other plans, and the twins were not sensible, and the twins were relentless. Cora Kimball turned out to be Amelia's brightest and most devoted pupil, first at her desk each morning, last to leave. Toby, who was not yet school age, took to appearing at the schoolhouse fence at the noon hour, with some small broken thing he wanted her opinion on: a bird's wing, a busted pocket knife, a wheel off a toy wagon. And every few days, a lopsided offering appeared on the schoolhouse step: a handful of wild plums, a jar of honey with Kimball scratched on the paper in a child's hand, once a whole dressed rabbit that Nathan Kimball had plainly not known his son was carrying 2 miles to town. He came for the rabbit, red to the ears. "I'm sorry," he said. "Toby took it off the smokehouse hook. I'll not have my boy pestering you with tribute like you're some kind of—" "Mr. Kimball," Amelia said, "I have been teaching school for 11 years, and no one has ever brought me a rabbit. It is the finest gift I have received in this town or any other. And if you take it back to that smokehouse, you will break a heart I have worked hard to coax open. Sit down. I've a stew on, and it wants a rabbit in it. You'll stay and eat what your son hunted, and so will he, and so will his sister." Nathan Kimball had not sat at a table with a woman and his children and a pot of stew in 8 months. He did it stiffly, like a man relearning the use of a hurt limb. Cora talked. Toby astonishingly laughed, a real laugh, at some small joke Amelia made about the rabbit's opinion of being stew, and Nathan watched his son laugh and had to look hard at his own plate for a moment. "You're good with them," he said, low, when the children had gone out to the schoolyard swing. "Better than, I've been no good to them, Miss Hadley. I'll say it plain. Their mother was the warm one. She did the loving, and I did the ranching, and that seemed a fair enough bargain while she lived. And now she's gone, and it turns out I never learned the loving part, and my children are being raised by a man who doesn't know how." His hands were flat on the table. "I get up, I feed them, I keep them clothed and safe. I can't seem to reach them, and a stranger sits in the grass with a bag of candy, and they hand her their whole hearts inside of 10 minutes. He shook his head. "I don't tell you this to be pitied. I tell you because I don't know who else to tell, and you seem to understand my children better than I do, and that shames me, and I'm grateful for it both at once." Amelia Hadley let a silence sit, the way she did with a child who'd finally said the hard thing. Then she said, "You reach them every day, Mr. Kimball. You're only doing it in a language they can't hear yet. You get up, you feed them, you keep them safe. That is loving, done with the hands instead of the mouth, and it is not a lesser kind. But," she smiled, "I'll tell you a teacher's secret. Children learn a new language faster when someone sits beside them and speaks it out loud until the words come easy. You could learn it too. It's not too late. It's the only lesson I've ever known a grown man to be able to catch up on." He looked at her a long time. "And who'd sit beside me," he said, "and speak it out loud?" Amelia felt the question land for what it was, and she did not look away from it. "I expect that could be arranged," she said quietly, "if a man asked." He was slow. She had known he would be slow, and she did not push, because a woman who pushes a grief-stiff man only teaches him to brace. She let the winter do the work. She came to Sunday dinner, and then to Wednesday supper, and she taught Toby his letters at the Kimball table, while Nathan mended tack across the room and pretended not to listen and heard every word. She taught Cora to bake bread. She taught Nathan Kimball, without either of them naming it, how to sit on the floor and be climbed on, how to answer a 5-year-old's 100th question without going somewhere behind his own eyes, how to say the words out loud: "Good morning, my girl. Well done, son. I'm proud of you," until they came without the awful effort, until his children stopped being careful around him, until one night Toby fell asleep in the crook of his father's arm without flinching once, and Nathan sat holding him for 2 hours, rather than move and wake him, and looked across the lamplight at Amelia Hadley, mending Cora's pinafore, and understood that the cold place in him had been quietly, thoroughly filled, and he'd hardly noticed it happening. The town noticed, of course, it always did, but by the time the church ladies had gathered enough breath to gossip, they found there was nothing to gossip about that was not simply good. A motherless pair growing sturdy and glad, a hard man softening at the edges, a fine teacher who never once neglected a single other child in her care for the sake of these two. Even Mrs. Pruitt at the boarding house, who had counted on keeping her favorite lodger, gave it up with grace and started saving back the good preserves for the Kimball table. The hard moment came in March, and it was the children's doing, as everything in that family seemed to be. A hard fever went through Willow Grove that spring, and it took Toby down fast. So fast the doctor spoke low to Nathan in the hall and did not promise anything. For 3 days and 3 nights the boy burned, and Nathan Kimball, who had already sat one death watch in that house and survived it only by turning to stone, felt the stone rising in him again, felt himself beginning to go away behind his own eyes, the way he had when Sarah died. And Amelia Hadley, who had no right, who was not kin, who could have gone home to her boarding room in her good sense, did not leave. She stayed. She wrung out the cloths and sang the low songs and dozed in the hard chair, and when she saw Nathan going to stone, she took his face in both her hands, right there in the sick room, and said, "No, not this time. You stay here with me, and with him. You do not go away. Toby needs his father's voice, not his father's absence. Talk to him, out loud, in the language, now." And Nathan Kimball leaned over his burning son and talked all through the worst night, told him about the spring calves coming, and the colt he'd break for him, and the fishing they'd do at the creek bend, and how his mother had loved him before ever he was born. Talked until his voice cracked, and Amelia's hand was fisted in the back of his shirt, holding him there in the room, in the present, in the love, and somewhere in the gray before dawn the fever broke, and Toby opened his eyes and said, "Pop, you're talking a lot," and Nathan Kimball put his face down against his son and wept like the thaw coming off the mountains. And Amelia Hadley wrapped her arms around the both of them and held on. He asked her a week later, out by the schoolyard swing where the whole thing had as good as started, with Cora and Toby watching from the fence rail and failing utterly to keep the secret they'd been told to keep. "I'm slow," Nathan said. "You know that by now. I'm slow and I'm stiff, and I spent 8 months teaching myself not to feel a thing, and it took a schoolteacher and a bag of lemon drops and 2 children with better sense than their father to undo it. I don't deserve, but I'm asking. Amelia, sit beside me the rest of my life and speak the language out loud, because I've finally learned to hear it, and I can't bear a room you're not in." He swallowed. "Marry me. Be theirs the way you've been theirs since the day they crossed that lawn. Be mine." "Nathan Kimball," Amelia said, and her sensible, well-defended heart was not defended at all anymore. "Your children chose me at a church social, before you could get a word out, and I have been theirs and yours since about 1 second after. Yes, 100 times yes." From the fence rail came a shriek of pure triumph, and then 2 children hit them both at knee height, and the 4 of them stood tangled together in the schoolyard grass in the thin March sun, and the tall, stiff man who had forgotten how to feel anything laughed out loud, freely, in the language, so that anyone passing could hear. They were married in the little Willow Grove church in May, and Cora carried the flowers and Toby carried the ring, on a length of good rope he had knotted himself, and the whole county, who had watched a family grieve, watched it made whole again. And every night after, at the Kimball table, there were 4 places set, and the man who had once fed his children in silence said grace out loud in a warm voice, and thanked God plainly, in front of all of them, for a lawn, and a lemon drop, and 2 small hands that let go of his, at exactly the right time, so that they could all take hold of something better.